Welcome back to our course on Microsoft Project. In the previous lecture, we have entered the work hours needed for each activity. In this lecture, we will set up the resources of our project. Before that, let me first talk about what a resource is. A resource is anything we need or use to complete our project. Generally, resources are classified as three types: human resources, machinery and equipment resources, and material resources. In Microsoft Project, there are some other types of resource that we will look a little bit later in this course. We will first define the resources of this project, and then we will assign them one by one to our activities in the project. As we said before, this sheet is called Gantt chart view. When we are looking at a Gantt chart, we are basically looking at the tasks involved in our project. If we want to look at the resources, there are a number of views specifically related to resources. Resource sheet is one of them, and we can define our resources in Resource Sheet view. Now, on the Task tab on the left, it says Gantt chart. If we click on that, we get a list of available views. We want to go to Resource Sheet, therefore I will click on that, but before doing it, please pay attention to the right end of the green status bar. First figure is dark green right now. If we click on the Resource Sheet, fourth figure is dark green right now. We can use these buttons in order to switch the most commonly used views. If you click on the first button, you will turn back to the Gantt chart view. If you hover on the buttons, you see the name of the view to switch. Let's click on the Resource Sheet, which is the fourth button, to go back to the Resource Sheet view. Okay, now as you see, this is our Resource Sheet. In the next lecture, we will define our resources here on this page. Hi, in this lecture, we start to define our resources. First, we will define the material resources. If you click on the type field of any row, you will see that there are basically three types of resources in Microsoft Project. These are work, material, and cost. A work resource is a person, a team, or a piece of machinery or equipment that consumes time when working on an activity. Therefore, we classify labor and machinery or equipment resources as work type. Material resources are the resources that are consumed in the process of performing activities. Materials like concrete, steel, and brick are some examples of material resources. Cost resources are the fixed costs associated with the activities. Expenses like travel expenses, rental of any equipment are some examples of cost resources. In this and the following lectures, we will define only material and work resources of our project. We will have a separate lecture for costs, and we will deal with cost resources in that lecture later on. Before starting to define the resources, let's expand the columns so that full column names are visible. Okay. Now we are ready to start defining our resources. Click on the resource name field of the first row and type concrete. Click on enter. As you see, we have some values inside of some fields. Since concrete is a material resource, we will change the type of resource as material. Here in this field, we will enter the units of the material. Since this is concrete, I will type M3 for cubic meters. Initials is the abbreviation of the resource. You may type anything that explains you this is the concrete resource here in this field. I will type CON as the abbreviation of our concrete resource. We can use the group property to assign resources to groups where we got some sort of common characteristics. Job function is very often the sort of characteristic that we would use. Since we will use this resource for our concrete works, I will type concrete works here. I will expand this column a little bit in order to see the full content. Here in this max units field, we define the maximum possible amount of this resource we can use. But this is available only for work resources. We don't enter any value since this is a material resource. The rest of the columns are related to cost. We are going to talk about the cost later on, so I will ignore the cost ones for the moment. Let's define other material resources of our project. Let's say we will have bricks. And this is going to be a material resource. I will type thousands as its unit. Therefore, for example, if you want 10,000 bricks, we will say 10 of these resource because this resource is 1000 bricks. I will use BRC as the abbreviation of brick resource and use walls as the group. Okay, there may be thousands of materials in a project. Here is a question for you. Do we need to define each and every resource in Microsoft Project? The answer is no. We should only define the materials important for us. Let me give you an example. For the painting works, for example, let's say we will subcontract the painting work. Since the subcontractor will provide all of the materials for this work, we will not care about the amount of painting materials to be used. Therefore, amount of painting material is not important for us and we will not define any material resource for this work. But for some works, no matter if we subcontract it or not, we may want to define the related material resources for monitoring purposes. Let's think about the doors and windows works of our project. If we subcontract this work, we will not care about material used for this work. But since we want to know how much work is done and update our plans according to this information, we still may want to define door and window resources. For example, let's say up to some specific date, all of the doors should be installed. If there are 1,000 doors in our project, we would like to know how many doors are installed each day, since we would like to monitor it and predict our future plans according to this information. Therefore, doors resource is an important resource, and we will define this resource in our project plan. Please do not think this is because this is a construction project. This logic applies to all kinds of projects. You should define the resources which are important for your project. Now, let's turn back to our project again. For our project, let's say we will subcontract the rest of the work, and therefore we will not care about the materials to be used. But I will still define the doors, windows and backfilling material resources because of the monitoring purposes. Let's define the material resource, doors. This is a material resource. The unit will be single. Let's say its initials is DRS and its group is doors and windows. I will do the same for windows. Material, single for units, WIN for the initials. Its group will be again doors and windows. Our final material resource will be backfilling material. This is a material resource. Its unit is tons. Initials is bfill. And let's say its group is backfilling and landscaping. In a project, there may be some material resources dependent on the duration of the activities. For example, let's think about the fuel of a machine. If the machine works for 2 hours, it will consume, let's say, 10 liters of fuel. But if it works for 4 hours, then it will consume 20 liters of fuel. Fuel consumption is directly related to the duration of the work. In Microsoft Project, it is possible to specify the amount of this resource that you need based on duration. We don't do anything different while defining this kind of resources. But when it comes to assigning it to an activity, we will do it in a different way. We will talk about this in the Assigning Resources lecture of this course. Now, assume the excavators will use fuel. Therefore, we will need to define our fuel resource. Resource type will be material. Its units will be liters. I will abbreviate it as L. Let's say its initials is again fuel. This time I leave the group field empty. We don't have to fill this field all the time. We are done with our material resources. Now it is time to define the work resources. We will do it in the next lecture. Assume we will use excavators to do the excavation, backfilling and landscaping works. Therefore, we need to define an excavator resource. This time, its resource type will be work. Since this is not a material resource, Microsoft Project will not let us to fill in this material label field. I will use EXC as the abbreviation of excavator resource. Here, I will type EBL, which is the abbreviation of excavating, backfilling, and landscaping. Now, we will determine the maximum units here in this field. Max unit says, what's the maximum number of this resource that we have available? Please note that this is not the amount we will use for activities. This is the maximum amount available. Let's type 3. This means there are 3 excavators available for our project. As you see, here in the base calendar field, we see the name of our project's calendar. If you click on it, you see that it is possible to use different calendars for work resources. For example, as you know, Saturdays are work days for our project. If a resource is not available on Saturdays, then we can use another calendar. For the excavator resource, I will not change the name of the calendar. Therefore, it will be available for our project whenever we need it. We will need concrete workers for our project. As you guess, they will do the concrete works. As we said before, 2 teams will do this work. Assume we will subcontract this work. For each team, we will sign a different contract with different companies. Therefore, we will sign 2 contracts with 2 different companies. But there is a problem. We haven't decided the companies at the moment. And therefore, we don't know their names and we don't know their capacities. In such a case, we can define this resource as a generic resource. After determining the companies in the future, we can determine new resources and replace our generic resource with these new ones. I will define our concrete workers here. This is going to be a work resource. Therefore, I don't change the type of the resource. Let's define its initials as CW. Its group will be concrete works. Let's say its maximum units is 50. Base calendar of this resource is again same as our project's calendar. Therefore, I will not change its calendar. Now, what I will do is, I will double click on this resource to open the resource information box. In this box, we see the information about our concrete workers resource. We will use this box in the future again, but at the moment we will only define this resource as a generic resource by clicking on this generic checkbox here. After clicking on OK, we see there is a little image here in the indicators field, telling us that this is a generic resource. In the future, we will replace this generic resource with defined resources. You can either follow the course content in order and wait for that lecture, or directly go to that lecture right now to see how we do the replacement. Name of that lecture is Replacing a Resource, and it is in the finalizing the project plan section. Thanks for watching. Now, I assume we have subcontracted rest of the work groups and signed contracts for each of them. Therefore, we know which company will do which work. Name of the first company is Stoner's Co. I will define its initials as SC. They will construct the walls of our project. Therefore, I use the group name Walls. Stoner's Co. can reach up to 30 workers. Therefore, its maximum units will be 30. We have another subcontractor named Plast Co. Its initials is PC, and they will do the plastering works. Therefore, I will type here in the group field plastering works. They can reach up to 20 workers. But there is a problem with this company. They don't work on Saturdays. Owner of the company said they will obey the rest of the working hours and working days of our project. In such a situation, we need to change the working hours for this resource only. To do that, we need to double-click on the resource and open the resource information box. As you see, there is a button over here. Change working time. Let's click on it. And the Change working time box is opened. This is the resource calendar for Plast Co. I will click on the Work Weeks tab and then click on the Details button. Since they don't work on Saturdays, we need to make Saturday to be a non-working day. To do that, we will click on Saturday and then click on the option saying Set Days to Non-Working Time. Then click on OK. Now, as you see, Saturdays became non-working days. Click on OK. Okay, let's continue to define the resources. Let's say we have subcontracted the painting works to the company named Painters Co. Because of some religious beliefs, this company does not work on some certain days every year. Therefore, we will create a different calendar for this resource. As we said, the resource name is Painters Co. Let's say its initials is PAC. Since they will do the painting works, I will type here painting works as its group. Assume we know that maximum units for this company is 25. Now, we will create a separate calendar for this resource. To do that, I click on the Project tab on the ribbon and then click on the button Change Working Time. This will open us the Change Working Time box. Remember, we have opened this box by clicking on the Change Working Time button inside of the resource information box before. Although they both have the same name and both look like each other, there are two main differences between these boxes. The first difference is this Create New Calendar button. This button does not exist if you open this box from inside of the resource information box. Let me show you. As you see, here in this box, we don't have any Create New Calendar button. The second difference is this. As you see, it says Resource Calendar for Painters Co. We cannot change the resource here from this box. But when we open this box from the ribbon, as you see, it is possible to change the resource name here. Now, let's create a new calendar for Painters Co. Click on the Create New Calendar button. Let's give a name to this calendar. It says, make a copy of our project calendar. We will use the same calendar while creating the calendar of the resource. Therefore, I will just click on the OK button here. Now, you see the exceptions. They are the ones we have created while creating our project's calendar. We will not change them, but we will add a new exception. Add a new exception named Religious Day. Its starting day is, let's say, the 15th of June. Now, click on the Details button. It is going to be a non-working day. Its recurrence pattern is yearly. Since it will continue every year, let's type its occurrence time as 99 times. Click on OK. Now, we have created an exception for this resource only. Click on OK. Okay, what do you think? We have created a specific calendar for Painters Co. But we haven't said Microsoft Project that this resource will use this calendar. To do so, let's click on the Base Calendar field. Select the related calendar. And we are done. Some resources may be available from one date to another date, or some others may partially be available for some time. In such cases, we need to determine the resource availability. Now, let's learn how to do it. We have subcontracted the installation work of doors and windows of our project to a company named DW. Let's say its initials is DW again. Its group will be Doors and Windows. Normally, this company has 20 workers available for our project. But there are some exceptional days. There will be only 10 workers available from 10th of August to the 20th of August. In order to determine the resource availability, I double-click on this resource and open the resource information box. In this box, there is a field down here named Resource Availability. We will determine the availability of our resource here in this field. We said there will be only 10 workers available from 10th of August to the 20th of August. To do so, I click on the Available To field and select the 9th of August. Now, 20 of this resource is available until 9th of August. Now, click on the Available From field of the second row and select 10th of August. And click on the Available To field and select 20th of August. Between these dates, 10 units of this resource will be available. Therefore, I change the units to be 10. Finally, click on the Available From field of the third row and select August 21st. Then, click on Available To field and type NA. Beginning on August 21st, 20 units of this resource will be available. Therefore, we will type 20 to the units field. And we are done now. Click on OK to turn back to our resource sheet again. Our final resource will be Roof and Roof Co. This company will construct our project's roof. Let's say its initials is RR. Its group is Roof and maximum units is 15. Now we are done with defining our resources. In the next lecture, we will assign these resources to our activities, so please join me for that. Thanks for watching. In the previous lectures, we have determined the resources of our project. Now, it is time to assign these resources to our activities. In order to assign a resource, we need to open the Assign Resources dialog box first. As you guess, we can do it in a couple of different ways. The first way is by right-clicking on an activity. Right-click on Excavation Work of Building A. As you see, one of the items that we can see here on this contextual menu is Assign Resource. Click on that. And here is the Assign Resources dialog box. We can open this box by using the ribbon. To do that, I will close this dialog box first. Click on the Resource tab. Now, click on the Assign Resources button here in the Assignments group inside of the ribbon. As you see, Assign Resources dialog box is opened again. We will use this box a lot while using Microsoft Project. Let's start with the work resources first. We want to allocate the excavator to the excavation activities. To do that, I will find the excavator resource in the dialog box, select it, and click on the Assign button. As you see, after clicking on the Assign button, one excavator is assigned to Excavation Work of Building A. Since we have determined the work hour of this activity as 45 hours, and an excavator works 9 hours a day, Microsoft Project has calculated the duration of this activity as 5 days, which is the result of 45 divided by 9. Now, let's assign 2 excavators to the activity named Excavation Work of Building B. You don't need to close and open the Assign Resources dialog box every time. It is always open until you close it. Therefore, this time I will select the Excavation Work of Building B and click on the Assign button. Type 2 as its unit. As you see, this time Microsoft Project has calculated the duration of this activity as 2.5. Since we have assigned 2 excavators, they will totally work 18 hours a day for this activity. And 2.5 is the result of 45 hours of work divided by 18 hours. It is logical, isn't it? In order to assign concrete workers to the first floor concrete works of Building A, I will choose that activity first. I will find the concrete workers in the dialog box. This time, I will directly type 10 as its unit and click on Enter. And it is assigned. As you see, I don't need to click on the Assign button. I will assign 10 concrete workers to do second floor concrete works. To do that, I click on this activity, find the concrete workers in the Assign Resources dialog box, and type 10 as its units. As you see, it is easy. Okay, as you remember, while determining the resources, we have assigned maximum units for each work resource. We should not assign resources to the activities more than its maximum amount. Therefore, before assigning a resource, we need to know its maximum unit. As you remember, we have subcontracted the construction of walls to a company named Stoners Co. To assign this resource, I first select the first floor walls of Building A. In order to remember the maximum unit of this resource, I find and double-click on this resource in the Assign Resources dialog box. This is our resource information box. Here, in the resource availability, we see that there are 30 units available for this resource. Therefore, we shouldn't assign more than 30 units. Since we know our maximum amount, we can close this box. I will assign 5 workers for this activity. This is less than 30. What happens if we exceed the maximum amount? Let's see. I click on the second floor and type 50 as the unit of Stoners Co. Since we don't have 50 units available, a red human figure appears in the indicators field. Therefore, we need to fix it. To do that, I will type 5. As you see, red figure is disappeared. If you are working with a large project, there may be hundreds of resources. Searching for a resource may be time-consuming in such cases. If you are preparing a schedule for this kind of a project, you may use the filtering feature. Let's say I will assign the work resource of first floor plastering works of Building A. I click on this activity. Inside of the Assign Resources dialog box, there is a plus sign inside of a square and it says Resource List Options. Click on that. If you click on the filtering checkbox here, now we can use the filtering feature. While we were creating the resources, as you remember, we have grouped them. If we filter the resources by the group, then we will easily find the resource we want. To do that, I click on All Resources, find the group, and click on it. It is asking for the group name. I will type Plastering Works. As you see, there is only one resource left, naming Plastco. This is exactly the resource we are looking for. I will type 5 as its amount. I will assign the same amount of this resource to the second floor. I click on the second floor and type 5 again. Now we will assign 5 painters to first floor painting works. Click on this activity. We need to cancel the filtering. To do that, I just click on the Filter by checkbox. Now, all of the resources available for our project are appeared again. Let's type 5 as the amount of painter's cow. Again, let's assign the same amount of resource to the second floor. I will assign 4 workers to doors and windows activities. And assign 5 workers to roof construction of building A activity. Finally, let's assign 2 excavators to backfilling and landscaping works of building A. Now, we are done with building A. I will leave the rest as a homework assignment. Please assign the same amount of resources to building B. For example, assign 10 concrete workers to first and second floors of concrete works of building B, just as we did to building A. Assign same amount of same resources just as we did in building A. Next lecture, we will learn how to assign the material resources. Please join me for that. Thanks for watching. In the previous lecture, we have assigned the work resources of the activities. Now, it is time to assign the material resources. Except for the duration-dependent resources like fuel, assigning a material resource is almost similar to assigning a work resource. Assigning duration-dependent resources is a little bit different, however. Let's first start to assign the material resources of construction works. To do that, we will need our Assign Resources dialog box. If you didn't close it in the previous lecture, then you are fine. You don't need to open it again. Since I have closed, I will need to open that first. I just right-click on the first floor concrete works of building A and then click on Assign Resources. Let's say we need 100 cubic meters of concrete for first floor concrete works of building A. To assign the concrete, I will type 100 as the amount of concrete. As you see, we have assigned 100 cubic meters of concrete. And it doesn't have any effect on the duration of the activity. Material resources do not affect the duration of activities. Let's assign the same amount of concrete to the second floor. Just click on the activity and type 100 for the units field of concrete resource. I want to assign 10,000 bricks to the first and second floor walls of building A. As you remember from the previous lecture, we can use the filtering feature in order to find the related resource easily. To do that, I click on the Filter by checkbox. If you can't see this Filter by checkbox, you will need to click on the Resource List options first. Click on the filtering box and find the group. It is asking for the group name to do the filtering. I will type walls. If you have hundreds of resources, filtering is a good feature. See, we have only 2 resources left. If I click on the other activities, I will see the previously assigned resources of activities as well as the walls resource group. I will assign 10,000 bricks. If you remember, while creating this resource, we have determined its units as thousands. Therefore, to assign 10,000 bricks, I will type 10 of this resource because this resource is 1000 bricks. I will do the same for the second floor. You may assign more than one material resource to an activity. For example, we may assign 5 windows and 3 doors to the first floor doors and windows activity. To do that, first we will unselect the Filter by checkbox. Then click on the activity First Floor Doors and Windows. Type 5 for windows and 42 doors. I will do the same for the second floor. Let's say we will need 100 tons of backfilling material for building A. I click on the activity named Backfilling and Landscaping Works of Building A first, and then assign 100 tons of backfilling material. And we are done. Now, only the fuel resource has left. As I said at the beginning of this lecture, fuel is a duration-dependent resource. To specify variable consumption of this resource, we need to indicate a number of units per hour. Let's suppose that our excavator uses 20 liters of fuel per hour. Let's click on the excavation work of building A and then find the resource fuel. Here in the units field, I will write 20/H. This means we will use 20 liters per hour. As you guess, since our excavators work 9 hours per day, they will consume 180 liters of fuel per day. Now, we are done with material resources of building A. I will leave the rest as a homework assignment. Please assign the same amount of resources to building B. For example, assign 100 cubic meters of concrete to first and second floors of concrete works of building B, just as we did to building A. Assign same amount of same resources just as we did in building A. next lecture, we will look at the task usage sheet. Then, we will learn how to introduce milestones into our project. So, please join me for that. Thanks for watching. In the previous lectures, we have assigned the resources of the activities. Now, we will look at the task usage sheet. We have created our activities in the Gantt chart sheet, then created our resources in the resource sheet. In the resource sheet, we have the general information about resources. For example, concrete workers resource is a work resource. Its maximum units is 50 and its base calendar is same as our project's calendar. Here, we don't have any information about how much of this resource is used, and also we don't have any information about when they are used. We use task usage sheet for this purpose. Here in the view group of the task tab, I will click on this little triangle and then click on the task usage. And this is our task usage sheet. To see the full task name, I will extract this task name column a little bit. On the left hand side of the screen, we see the tasks which we have created in the Gantt chart sheet, and we also see the resources assigned to these tasks. For example, there are 2 resources assigned to excavation work of building A, fuel and excavator. This task uses 900 liters of fuel and 45 hours of excavator work is needed. On the right hand side of the screen, we can see the detailed information about when these resources are used. I will use the scroll bar here in order to come to the start date of these resources. As you see, 180 liters of fuel is needed each day, while we are doing the excavation work of building A. And 9 hours of excavator work is needed each day. If you don't see the resource usage in daily base, you will need to change the time scale of your table. To do that, click on the View tab. Here in the Zoom group, you can manually zoom in or zoom out on the calendar. Or you can use this box under the time scale label. I will change it to days. For now, that's enough about the task usage sheet. This lecture was such an introduction about this sheet, and we will have a deeper look in the future lectures. Thanks for watching. In the previous lecture, we have assigned the material resources of the activities. Since we are done with our resources, we will introduce a couple of simple milestones into our project. Okay, what is a milestone? Let's assume you have a meeting with your executives. Your executives want to learn about some important dates of the project. In real life, there may be hundreds of tasks in a project. In such a meeting, searching for a specific date among hundreds of tasks takes time. Instead of searching among hundreds of tasks, we may create some zero-duration tasks in order to indicate some important dates of the project. Therefore, In such a meeting, you will have these important days with you, and if someone asks you about an important date, you may answer that question easily. These zero duration tasks are called milestones. Don't think that we need milestones just for this kind of a meeting. You might use milestones for some other purposes too. Since they make it easy to spot some important days of your project, you will be able to pay attention to the work to be done in the future. A milestone list is a nice tool for monitoring the deadlines of the project. Technically, you may add milestones anywhere you want in your project plan. But it is a good idea to create a task group for milestones. Therefore, let's create a task group named Milestones. Now, I will create a milestone named Excavation Completed. Let's indent this task. In order to tell Microsoft Project that this is a milestone, we need to change the duration of this task from 1 day to 0 days. We know that excavation works will be completed after completion of excavation work of Building B activity. Therefore, we need to link our milestone to this activity. To do that, let's double-click on the Excavation Completed milestone. Select the Predecessors tab. Click on the task name and choose Excavation Works of Building B. It's going to be Finish to Start type and it will have 0 legs. Click on OK. And we have created our first milestone. Let's create another milestone then. This time, I want to show the start date of construction works. Let's create a milestone named Construction Works Start. Change the duration and make it 0. Then double click on the task. Click on the task name and select the construction works. This is the name of the task group of construction works. Since we will link its start date, it has to be a start to start type. Click on OK. Now, we have created a start milestone. Generally, if a milestone indicates a starting date, it is called a start milestone. And if it indicates a finish date, it is called a finish milestone. Therefore, excavation completed is a finish milestone and construction work start is a start milestone. Okay, let's create another milestone named Construction Works Finished. This time, I will double click on this task. Click on the Advanced tab. Here, there is a checkbox. It says Mark task as milestone. If you click on this checkbox and then click on OK, then this task becomes a milestone. Here, Please note that its duration is still 1 day ? Its duration is not 0, but it still is a milestone. Normally, milestones have 0 duration. But in Microsoft Project, you can create milestones having durations larger than 0. Okay, how do I know that this is a milestone then? Here in the Gantt chart, activities are represented by bars and milestones are represented with diamonds by default. As you see, this task is a milestone. Although it is a milestone, construction works finished is just a date. And a date is a date, I mean, it should not have any duration. Therefore, I will change its duration to be 0. Now, I will link this milestone. In the predecessor field, I will type 6 to create a finish to start relationship with construction works task group. And we are done. So, that's it on milestones for now. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi! Up to here, we have created and linked our tasks. We have created resources and assigned them to the activities of our project. Now, it is time to look at costs. In this lecture, we will learn how to assign costs to resources. Then, in the following lectures, we will talk about the other project costs. To assign costs to resources, we will need to open the resource sheet of our project. Let's click on the resource sheet button right here. And we have our resource sheet. Our first resource is concrete. Let's say 1 cubic meter of concrete costs us $30. This is, we will pay $30 for each cubic meter of concrete we will use for our project. To indicate the unit cost of this resource, we will use the standard rate field over here. Just type 30 in this field. If this was a work resource, we most probably would have a different unit cost for overtime works. But for material resources, we don't have this option available. If you try to fill in this field, you cannot type any rate inside. But we will use cost per use and accrue at fields for the following resources. Our next material resource is bricks. 1000 bricks cost us $500. Again, we will use the standard rate field over here. And we are done. For some resources, we may have some kind of additional cost per use. For example, we may have an additional delivery cost. In such cases, we use this cost per use field. Let's say each door cost us $300, and after arrival of each door, we will pay an additional $50. Let's first type the unit cost first. Now, to indicate the delivery charge, just type 50 in the cost per use field. As you see, it is easy. Okay. Each window will cost us $350, and after arrival of each window, we will pay an additional $50 as delivery charge. Again, we will type 250 in the standard rate field and 50 in the cost per use field. And we are done. By default, Microsoft Project assumes cost of resources are accrued prorated, so they are prorated throughout the life of the activity. For example, if the duration of concreting works is 10 days and you need 100 cubic meters of concrete for this activity, then you will be incurring the cost of 10 cubic meters of concrete each day. But for some activities, you may make the related payment at the beginning or at the end of the activity. In such situations, you will need to change the accrue at field from prorated to start or end. For example, let's say we will make the payment for backfilling material at the end of the activity. Assuming its unit price to be $5, let's first enter its standard rate. To change the accrue at field, we will click on this field. Since we will make the related payment at the end of the related activities, then we will choose the end option. Now, let's assume the unit price of the fuel is $0.70 and we will make the related payment at the beginning of the activity. Again, we will first enter the unit price. Now, click on the accrue at field. Since we will make the related payment at the beginning of the activity, we will choose the start option. And we are done. Up to here, we have learned to enter the cost of the material resources. Now, it is time to enter the cost of the work resources. Our first work resource is excavator. Let's assume 1 hour of excavator work will cost us $50. Again, we will enter this value into the standard rate field. For the work resources, we most probably have a different hourly price for overtime works. We will use the overtime rate field to indicate these overtime costs. Let's say 1 hour of overtime work of excavator resource cost us $70. Concrete workers resource is a generic resource. For the generic resources, we don't do anything special. I will assume its hourly price as $20 and overtime rate as $30. Just like the material resources, we may use the cost per use field for one-time payments. For example, due to contract you have signed with the subcontractor, you may have some expenses to pay like accommodation allowance for the staff of the subcontractor. Let's say, due to the contract we have signed with Stoner's Co., we will make $500 payment for the travel expenses of each worker. I will assume the same cost rates as concrete workers first. Then I will type 500 to the cost per use field. And that's it. Up to here, we have learned how to assign basic costs to work and material resources. Next lecture, we will talk about the cost rate tables, so please join me for that. Thanks for watching. Hi again. In the previous lecture, we have entered the basic costs of the resources. We have assumed the standard and overtime rates do not change over time. In some cases, some costs may change over time, however. For example, let's say due to our contract, standard and overtime rates of Plasco and Painters Co. will increase 5% at the end of each year. Let's learn how to enter these values then. First, we will need Resource Information box. I will double click on the resource Plasco. And here is our Resource Information box. Here, we will click on the Costs tab, and here is the cost rate table. Here it says A default. I will talk about this a little bit later. Okay, we said the standard and overtime rates will increase 5% at the end of each year. Let's say up to end of the year, standard and overtime rates are same as other resources. I will type 20 to the standard rate field and 30 to the overtime rate field. Since new rates will apply from the beginning of the next year, here I will click on the effective date field of the second row and select first day of January 2018. Now, we are ready to enter the rates which are going to be effective from the beginning of the first day of the next year. In the standard rate field, I will type 21 since it is going to be increased by 5%. Here, in these fields, we can type the unit costs directly just as we did now, or we can make the Microsoft project to calculate it for us. To do that, we will type the increase rate instead of typing the cost directly. I will type 5% here in this overtime rate field then. As you see, it calculates the new rate automatically. Here, we can enter the rates which are going to be applied after the end of 2018, but since our project will not go that further, this information will be unnecessary. Therefore, this information we have just entered is enough for our project. Let's click on OK to close the Resource Information dialog box. We will do the same for Painters Co. Let's double click on it then. Its standard rate is 20 and overtime rate is 30. The effective date is the January 1st of 2018. Standard rate will increase 5% and overtime rate will increase 5%. And click on OK. In some cases, different cost rates may apply to the same resource for different activities. For example, let's assume we have some special doors at the second floor of our project. Installation of these doors is harder than the standard doors we have at the first floor. Because of this reason, unit costs of the second floor will be 50% more than on the first floor. Let's see how we will enter the unit costs in such a situation. We will again need the cost rate table. Therefore, I will double click on the resource DW and click on the Costs tab. As you see, there are tabs over here: A, B, C, D, and E. In each tab, we may enter different cost rates for a resource. After entering different cost rates, we will need to assign them to the related activities. On the A tab, it says Default. Microsoft Project uses the rates entered in the A tab by default. For the unit cost of installation of standard doors, I will use this tab. Let's assume we have the same unit costs just as we have for other resources. Therefore, for the standard rate, I will enter 20, and for the overtime rate, I will enter 30. These are the unit prices which are going to be effective for the first floor. I will call them our A costs. To enter the rates of second floor, I will click on the tab B. Now, I will enter the unit prices, which are 50% more of the first floor. Standard rate was $20 for the first floor. Therefore, I will enter 30 here, which is 50% higher than 20. And overtime rate will be $45. These are our B costs. Let's click on OK. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to assign these rates to the activities. To do that, we will need our task usage sheet. Therefore, I will click on here to reach this sheet. To see the full names, I will expand the task name column a little bit. We have assigned the resource DW to Doors and Windows activities. Therefore, I will scroll down a little bit to find the Doors and Windows. These are the activities for installation of first and second floor doors and windows of Building A. As you see, DW is assigned to both of the activities. Let's double click on the DW of first floor. This is the assignment information dialog box. Here it says cost rate table. As we said before, default cost rate table is the A table. Since standard prices will be applied for the first floor, we will not change it. Click on OK. Let's double click on the DWO second floor. Since B rates will be applied to the second floor, I will click on here and choose B. Now, unit prices written in the B rate table will be applied to the second floor. Click on OK. We need to do the same thing for Building B. Therefore, let's scroll down a little bit. Since A rates are applied by default, we will not make any change for the first floor. Let's double click on the resource DW of the second floor doors and windows of building B. Change the cost rate table as B and click on OK. Here, on this sheet, we can easily see the effects of the change we did right now. In order to do that, we will need the cost rows here in this table. If you double click here on the right hand side table, the Table Styles dialog box opens. Here, we can add or remove the rows. We will need the cost row, therefore, in the available fields, I will scroll down a little bit until I find the cost. If you double click on cost, you see that it has transferred from available fields to show these fields. Here, we can do the same thing by using these buttons. For example, I can hide this cost row by clicking on the Hide button, or show it again by clicking on the Show button. Click on OK. As you see, cost rows are added. To see the values of doors and windows, I will go left a little bit. As you see, for the DW resource of first floor, $720 will be spent each day. For the second floor, $1,080 will be spent, which is 50% more than $720. This is what we should expect. Since we are done, let's go back to our resource sheet. Only the resource Roof and Roof Co is left, and I will leave it to you as a homework assignment. Two different rates will be applied to buildings A and B. Standard rate of building A will be $20 and overtime rate will be $30, and both of them will increase 5% by the beginning of the year 2018. Standard rate of building B will be $40 and overtime rate will be $60. These prices will not change by the beginning of the year 2018, but I want you to add a $500 of per use cost. All of the B costs will be paid at the end. Therefore, you will need to change the cost accrual for the B rates from prorated to end. I know it seems complicated, but don't worry. Following lecture is the solution of this homework. But before going to that lecture, I strongly recommend you to do it by yourself. This is the opportunity for you to apply what you have learned in this lecture. So, that's it for this lecture. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Hi. In this lecture, you will find the solution of the homework assignment given in the previous lecture. We will enter the unit prices for the resource Roof and Roof Co. Let's double click on it to open the resource information dialog box. Click on the Costs tab. We said we will have different values for building A and building B. Let's say we will use the A rates for building A. The standard rate is $20 and overtime rate is $30. Both of these rates will increase 5% by the beginning of the year 2018. Therefore, the effective date for the new rates will be the first day of January 2018. In order to make Microsoft Project to calculate the new values by itself, just write 5% over here. And we will do the same for the overtime rate. We are done with the A rates, which are going to be effective in building A. Now, we will enter the values for building B. Let's use the B rate table. The standard rate is $40 and overtime rate is $60. There's $500 of per use cost. This cost will be effective only for these B rates. All of the B costs will be paid at the end. Therefore, we will change the cost accrual here from prorated to end. Click on OK. Now, we have defined the rates, but we haven't assigned them to the activities. We need our task usage sheet. For the roof construction of building A, we will use the A rates by default. Therefore, we don't need to take any action for this activity. Let's scroll down a little bit to find the roof of building B. Here, we will double click on Roof and Roof Co. Here in this Assignment Information dialog box, we will change the cost rate table from A to B. Click on OK and we are done. To see the effect of the change we have made, let's go to the Start date of Roof and Roof Co resource. As you see, since we have changed the cost accrual from prorated to end, we don't have any cost here. All of the costs are effective at the end. Let's go back to the resource sheet. Now, we are done with the homework assignment. In the next lecture, we will learn what a cost resource is. So, see you in that lecture. Hi. Up to here, we have learned two different types of resources. These were work and material resources. However, there is one more resource type in Microsoft Project. This is the cost resource. In a project, some tasks may be associated with a particular type of cost. Travel expenses are good example for this kind of resources. We can define travel expenses as a cost resource, and then we can use this resource as a financial cost associated with a task in a project plan. Let's say, due to the contract we have signed with Plasco, we will pay the travel expenses of this subcontractor. If you remember, there was a similar issue for Stoner's Co. We have defined a $500 of cost per use for their travel expenses. After we define and assign the cost resource, I will talk about the difference between a cost resource and cost per use of a resource. Let's define our travel expenses. This is going to be a cost resource. Let's write travel to the initials field. I will define a group name expenses. Okay, as you see, we cannot fill in the max units, standard rate, overtime rate, and cost per use fields. Cost resources don't do any work and they don't have any effect on the scheduling of a task. But we have the opportunity to change the accrue at field. I will leave this field as prorated. Now, we need to assign this resource to do related tasks. Let's go to the Gantt chart view. Plasco is the subcontractor company which does the plastering works. Therefore, we need to assign the travel expense to plastering works. Let's click on first floor plastering works of Building A. From the Resource tab, click on Assign Resources button. Let's say travel expenses we will pay is $500. Therefore, we will type 500 to the cost field of travel expenses. We will do the same for all of the plastering works. Click on the second floor plastering works of Building A. Type 500. Scroll down a little bit and find the plastering works of Building B. Click on the first floor and type 500 in the cost field of travel expenses. Click on the second floor and do the same thing. Let's close this window. Now, let's go to the task usage sheet to see what happened after we assigned this resource. If you remember, we have defined the accrue at field of the travel expense resource as prorated. Since it is prorated, $500 is distributed equally here. At the beginning of this lecture, I said I will talk about the difference between a cost resource and cost per use of a resource. Okay, let's go to Stoner's code. If you remember, we have defined $500 of cost per use for the travel expenses of Stoner's code. Here, please note that this cost applies for each worker. Since Stoner's Co. has 5 workers, the total travel cost will be 5 times 500, which is 2,500. But the cost we have determined for the travel expenses of Plasco is the total travel cost itself. As you see, $2,500 is added to the first working day. The cost of the first day seems to be $3,400. This is the summation of $900 and $2,500. Here, $900 is the cost of workers and $2,500 is the travel expenses. But the cost of travel expenses resource is distributed equally since we have defined the accrue at field as prorated. However, we have the opportunity to change that field to start or end. After assigning a cost resource to a task, we can see the cumulative costs for that resource. We will see how to do it in the following lectures later on. But we don't have this opportunity for the cost per use costs or resources, and this is another difference. So that's it about the cost resources. We are going to look at the project costs in the following lecture. See you in that lecture. Hi! Up to here, we have seen how to assign costs to the resources. In a project, there are some other costs which are not directly related to the resources. In this lecture, we will learn how to handle these costs. As we have seen in the previous lectures, we can add or remove the columns if we want. To make the life easier, Microsoft Project has some formats that include the commonly used columns for specific work for us. For example, since we are going to work with project costs right now, we will need some other columns like fixed cost, total cost, and other columns related to the cost of the project. Microsoft Project has a table for us that includes these columns. To reach the cost table, click on the View tab of the ribbon first. Here in the Data group, there is a button named Tables. Click on this button. Here is the list of some table groups that Microsoft Project has by default. Now, since we want to see the columns related to project costs, we need to click on the Costs. To see the full columns, I will enlarge the table a little bit. Okay, at the beginning of this lecture, I said there may be some other costs other than resource costs. For example, let's assume before starting the excavation works, we need to make some special tax payment to the local government. The amount of the tax is, let's say, $5,000. Let's assume we will make the payment to the subcontractor and they will make the tax payment for us. To enter such costs, we will use the fixed cost column here. We can enter a fixed cost to the individual tasks, to the task groups, or to the project. Since we have assumed this tax is related to excavation works, I will enter this value in the fixed cost field of the excavation works group. Since this is a tax payment and we will make the payment to the subcontractor at the beginning of the excavation works, we need to change the fixed cost accrual field from prorated to start. To see the full project cost, I will expand this total cost column a little bit. Here, we see the total cost of our project. To see how the fixed cost affects the cost of the excavation works, let's go to the beginning of the excavation works. Here, as you see, $5,000 is added to the excavation works at the very beginning of the task. Now, let's assume you are going to employ a consultant for construction works. Due to your agreement, you will make a fixed $15,000 of payment to him at the end of the construction works. you will also employ an inspector again for construction works. Due to your agreement with her, you will make a fixed $5,000 of payment. But this time, you will pay it at the beginning of the construction works. Since you will make one of the payments at the beginning and the other one at the end, you cannot use the fixed cost field over here. Now, how can you enter fixed costs in such cases? In such cases, it is better to create fixed cost resources and assign them to the task groups. Let's do it for our case. We need to go to the resource sheet. We said we have a consultant for construction works. And a construction inspector. They are going to be work resources. Let's say their initials to be CC and CI. Let's say their group is fixed cost resources. Now, we will not enter any value in the standard rate or overtime rate fields. Since we will make a fixed payment, we will use the cost per use field. The fixed cost of the consultant was $15,000. And I will change the accrue at field from prorated to end, since we will make the payment at the end. The fixed cost of the inspector was $5,000. And let's change the accrue at field from prorated to start, since we will make the payment at the beginning. Now, we need to assign these resources. Let's go back to the task usage sheet. As you remember, we have assigned our resources in the Gantt chart sheet. However, we can do it in the task usage sheet too. Let's right-click on the construction works task and click on the Assign Resources. We will assign one inspector and one consultant. Click on the Close button. As you see, we have assigned the inspector and the consultant as fixed cost resources to the construction works task. Up to here, we have seen almost every cost type, but there is still one more cost type. This is the budget costs. In the next lecture, we will talk about the budget costs, so please join me for that. Thanks for watching. Hi. Up to here, we have seen almost every cost type, but there is still one more left. All of the costs we have entered were our known costs. This is, we almost know how much money we will spend, and we will calculate them one by one. We may want to add some cost in a project for some expenses that we cannot calculate yet. I mean, we know we will spend money on something, but we don't know how much money we will spend at the moment. Incidental costs is a good example of that. We define such costs as budget costs in Microsoft Project. Let's see how to define such costs. let's go to the resources sheet. I will create a new resource here for incidental costs. As you guess, it's going to be a cost resource. Let's type IC for the initials. Let's say its group is budget cost, and I will leave the accrue at field as prorated. Now double click on this resource to open the resource information dialog box. There is a checkbox over here named budget. Click on this checkbox to indicate that this is a budget resource. Click on OK to close this dialog box. Now we need to assign this resource to our project. To do that, we will go to the task usage sheet. Here, we will add this kind of costs under the summary task. So, double click on that to open the summary task information dialog box. Click on the resources tab. We can only assign budget resources to the summary task. Click on the resource name and find the incidental costs. Here, we cannot enter any value for this budget cost at the moment. Just click on OK to close the dialog box. Now, to enter the value for incidental costs, we need to add the budget column over here. To do that, right-click on any column name, choose Insert Column, and find the budget cost. Now, we are able to enter a value for this resource. I will type $5,000 and we are done. Here, please note that total cost of the project is not changed after adding the budget cost. Budget costs do not affect the total cost of the project. Don't forget. And that's it for this lecture. In the next lecture, we will talk about the constraints and deadlines. So, please join me for that. Thanks for watching. Hi. In this lecture, we are going to talk about constraints and deadlines. But before doing that, we need to define the start date of our project. First, let's go to the Gantt chart view. I will expand the start and finish dates a little bit. As you see, it seems like our project starts on this date. This date is automatically generated by Microsoft Project. Normally, this is the date we have started to create our project and it needs to be changed. To change it, let's click on the Project tab. Here in the Properties group, click on Project Information button. Here, we will change the start date. Let's say our project will start on the 17th of April 2017. Here, as you see, there is another date. It says current date. We will use this date when we are tracking the project. But for now on, since our project hasn't been started yet, we will make it to be same as the start date. Click on OK. As you see, the start date of the project is now 17th of April 2017. The finish date of the project is automatically calculated according to this date. Now we can talk about constraints and deadlines. In a project, there may be some dates at which some tasks have to be finished by, or there may be some dates at which some tasks should start not earlier than. In such and similar cases, we may use constraints. For example, let's say for our project, there is a must finish by date for excavation works. All of the excavation works must finish by 30th day of April. Assume local authorities won't let you do the excavation work after the 30th of April. In such a case, we may define a constraint for excavation works. Constraints may be applied to the activities or activity groups. In our case, since we have a restriction for excavation works, we will determine a constraint for excavation works group. Let's double click on the excavation works. In the Summary Task Information dialog box, click on the Advanced tab. Here, by default, this task's constraint type is as soon as possible. As the name implies, this option tells us that this task starts as soon as possible. If you click on that, you will see there are some other options. If a task should finish before a certain date, we need to choose Finish no later than. If a task should start after a certain date, we need to choose Start no earlier than. Since this is an activity group, we have only 3 options available. Let me show you the other options. I will click on Cancel. This time, I will double click on the activity Excavation work of Building A. Here in the Advanced tab, if you click on the Constraint type, you see that there are 8 options available. First one is as late as possible. If you choose this option, activity starts as late as possible depending on the slack of that activity. For example, if the slack of the activity is 2, start date of this activity will be 2 days late, comparing to the date we would get for as soon as possible option. If you want a task to finish no earlier than a certain date, we will choose the Finish no earlier than option. If a task should finish or start on a certain date, then we need to choose either one of the Must finish on or Must start on options. If a task should start before a certain date, we need to choose Start no later than option. Okay, let's go back to the excavation works again. In our case, since we would like to finish the excavation works before the 30th day of April, we will choose Finish no later than option first. And then we will define the constraint date. Click on OK. As you see, there is a new symbol appeared in the Indicators field. If you hover on that, we understand that this task has a constraint. We will see the effect of this constraint on calculations in the tracking lectures later on. Just like a constraint, we can also define a deadline for a task. The main difference between a constraint and a deadline is a constraint directly affects the scheduling calculations of the project, so the calculations are done due to that constraint. But a deadline is just a goal and it does not affect the scheduling calculations. Only a warning appears if the task goes past its deadline. Let's say we have a target date for construction works. We want our construction works to finish before 10th of August. To determine a deadline, we will again double-click on the task. In this case, our task is the construction works task. Here in the Advanced tab, we will choose from the date picker August 10th, 2017. And click on OK. It seems like nothing happened, but if we scroll to the right a little bit on the Gantt chart, we see that there is an arrow added to the Gantt chart, and this is our deadline for this task. If you hover on this arrow, you will see the information about this deadline. In the tracking lectures later on, we will see what happens if the task goes past its deadline. Since constraints affect the scheduling calculations, it is a good idea to use them for the contractual constrictions or for the restrictions like in our example. Your calculations should be done due to those restrictions, otherwise you may get in trouble. Deadlines are generally used for important dates or goals. If the task goes past its deadline, you will try to find a solution for that, but you most probably will not get in trouble since there is no legal restriction. Now, we know how to determine a constraint and a deadline, and we know the main difference between them. In the next lecture, we will talk about the critical path of our project. So, that's it for this lecture. I will see you in the next one.